Hey, I wasn't going to do this, but I need to make a statement here. For those of you that don't know, there's a gospel celebration that's being put on by Pastor Donnie McClurkin, and there's a big uproar. There's several different artists and speakers that are going to be attending and speaking and all that. But there's a big uproar because they have as one of their headlining artists Snoop Dogg. And people are upset about this for good reason, because Snoop, obviously, with his history and what he talks about and what he upholds and what he lives by, um, is antithetical to the gospel and what a believer should live and think and be. And so they're voicing their opinions about it and very upset at Pastor Donnie McClurkin because he's the one that's putting it on. I've seen this trend begin to uptick in the church and particularly in the black community where we are mixing and meshing together the desire to reach out or outreach to secular artists and have quote unquote pull them into the kingdom, and at the same time yoke themselves with these artists. We saw that with Tasha Cobb and Nicki Minaj, and now we're seeing it with Snoop Dogg and Donnie McClurkin. And then when you try to call them on it, then they want to call you the Pharisee. They want to say, how do you know God is not working and and all that? Well, we have to go by biblical precedents. That's the only thing we can go by. Otherwise, we're going by opinion. And biblical precedents shows that this is not the right way. First of all, the Bible says, what fellowship does light have with darkness? Now, you might say to me, well, how do you know Snoop hasn't given his life to the Lord? Well, has he made a public confession of his allegiance to Christ alone, forsaking all other things? Not Christ and weed or Christ and hip hop, but Christ alone. Has he made a public confession of faith? If the precedent set when the most radical conversion that happened in the New Testament was Paul, right? He went from Saul to Paul, but he was killing Christians. But guess what? After God knocked him off of his Damascus Road experience, then there was a period of time where he did nothing but learn. He didn't get knocked off the Damascus and then become a Christian and then automatically go out into the field and start preaching. If you do your history, it was some years before he did that. He got knocked off his horse, and there was some years before he started preaching the gospel. He had to learn. So has Snoop done that? Has that happened? See, the thing is that you are yoking together because he created a gospel album, which on one hand, if he has not changed his life, if he has not turned his life over to the Lord, I don't say changed his life, but if he hasn't first given his life to the Lord and made a public confession that he's repenting, turning away from his sin, from his lifestyle of sin, which we all have sinned, but if he hasn't turned away from that, and made the public confession of turning away from that and made a concerted effort to not live the life that he was living after salvation, then all he's doing is creating a gospel album because it feels good, because maybe he was raised up in it and he was taught right. See, gospel music is being used as a tool for people to think that they can dab their toe into Christianity and keep their foot and the rest of their whole body in the world. I don't begrudge anybody for reaching out to Nicki Minaj, but how are you going to yoke your gifting, what your thing that God has given you to bring others into the kingdom and to preach the unadulterated gospel? You are confusing and muddying the waters. Normal, regular people don't know that there is a stark difference. They love Snoop, and they look at Snoop connecting with Donnie, and it doesn't show them that are watching that, oh, there's got to be a lifestyle difference. Then people are not Pharisees, Pastor McClurkin, respectfully. They're not Pharisees for questioning your moves here. Why would you do that? Why would you yoke yourself together with a non-believer? The Bible, I know you know the word. You probably know it better than me, but the word says a lot about fellowshipping. It doesn't it says that we are to outreach to them, but on our terms. And you might say, well, he's doing a concert with me. I'm not doing a concert with him. But that's still not on your own terms. You're putting him out there without a clear change in his life that others can see. Oh, yeah, no, he has made a public declaration that he is now a believer. He has repented from his ways and going in the opposite direction. So I'm seeing this trend happen, and with Fred Hammond doing it. And people are making excuses for it. And they're making excuses and allowances for it when I don't think that this is anywhere near what God's will would be. What would be probably better to do is what happened with Paul, is if Snoop or Nikki or any of the other people have been making some changes, you see some fruit going on, then there needs to be behind the scenes working of that person, fellowshipping with that person behind the scenes, loving on them, letting them see where they need to change and grow by your example, speaking the truth in love. And if they say, hey, I want to do a gospel album, what do you think of that? Well, that's great, but you need to make a public profession of faith, not the gospel and Rastafarianism. Not the gospel and smoking up and weed and he needs to be able to denounce his old self. That's what Saul/Paul did. He let everybody know that was the old me. That ain't me no more. And have they done that? No. Nikki didn't do it. Nikki did the song with Tasha Cobbs and went right back to her regular life. And people look at that and think that that's okay. It's not okay. It's not okay. What it does is it creates a nation of a generation of lukewarm people who think they're believers. The word says that we are to check ourselves to see if we are in the faith. We are to die daily. That do not be surprised if the world hates us. And that brings me to my last point here, is that I think this trend is going on because we want the world to like us so bad. Why do we care that the world likes us? We want the world to be so cool with us, so we don't want to be seen as bigots or as we don't want them to call us judgmental or bigots, and we're apologizing all over the place for the gospel. Yeah, there's some bad players that have been judgmental and said some things that were wrong and not kept people in the church. I used to be a gospel rapper. I know what that's like, where the church don't accept you and the secular world don't accept you. So I know what that's like. But you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You can't swing so far over to the side of wanting to be seeker friendly and letting them come in and want to be open and loving and all that, to the point where you forget the truth part of the love. It says speak the truth in love. You can't just speak love with no truth, and you can't speak truth without love. That's watering down the gospel. And yes, that's strong words. I know that, Pastor Donnie, you've been in ministry for umpteen gazillion years and seen God do many great things, and we'll see God do many great things in the future, I believe. But come on, bruh. Like, we got to stick to what the word says and not what, it makes it feel like we're trying to not please the world, but make our